I'd like to read you a poem. It's called You and I. I am a resident, you reside. I am admitted, you move in. I have behavior problems, you are rude. I am non-compliant, you don't like being told what to do. When I ask you out to dinner, it's an outing. When you ask someone out, it's a date. I don't know how many people have read the progress notes people write about me. I don't even know what's in there. You didn't speak to your friend for a month after she read your journal. I make mistakes during my check writing program. Someday I might get a bank account. You forget to record some withdrawals from your account. The bank calls to remind you. I wanted to talk with the nice-looking person behind us at the grocery store. I was told it was inappropriate to talk with strangers. You met your spouse in the produce department. He couldn't find the bean sprouts, which, by the way, they're tough to find. I celebrated my birthday yesterday with 5 other residents and 2 staff members. I hope my family sends a card. Your family threw you a surprise party. Your brother couldn't make it from out of state. It sounded wonderful. My case manager sends a report every month to my guardian. It says everything I did wrong and some things I did right. You're still mad at your sister for calling your mom after you got a speeding ticket. I'm on a special diet because I'm 5 pounds over my ideal body weight. Your doctor gave up telling you. Yeah. I am learning household skills. You hate housework. I am learning leisure skills. Your shirt says you're a couch potato. After I do my budget program tonight, I might get to go to McDonald's if I have enough money. You were glad the new French restaurant accepted your charge card. My case manager, psychologist, RN, occupational therapist, physical therapist, nutritionist, and house staff set goals for me for next year. You haven't decided what you want out of life. Someday I will be discharged. Maybe. You will move onward and upward. This has got to be 35 years old. And it's very simple. It boils down to us and them. And until we change our language, until we start going through and understanding our relationship with people, we'll still be on this page. We need to get off the page. Okay, let's continue with this final rule. In residential settings, owned or controlled by. Now, you sort of follow that. Many of these properties where people live are owned by the agency that actually provides the support. That's a really important point. My guess is throughout the country, it's probably 70, 80% of all those properties are owned or controlled by the agency, the organization. So again, in residential settings owned or controlled by a service provider, additional requirements, there's that 4-letter word, must be met. Now, before I put it up here, I'll just explain simply what it means. You have to separate the residence, the place where people live, from the support. Got it? This has nothing to do with this, 2 independent things. Historically, when people live in a group home and the group home provider says, we can't meet that person's need. They're now very medically involved and we don't do this kind of procedure, or their conduct is such that we can't support them. They inform the regional center and give notice that the person needs to move out. I'm not making this up. I mean, this is the fact. Well, guess what? That's gone. Under the final rule, that's fine. That provider doesn't have to provide support to that person. But they don't move. Under the final rule, and this regional center has already put this together, every single person has to have a lease. And your lease to live there has nothing to do with who provides the support to you. Is everybody with me on that? So it's looking very different. Under the old system, if we can't meet your needs, we're going to throw you out of your house, which sort of meant it was never really your house to begin with. We're in control, and we decide who lives in this home. This specifically prevents that from happening. Now, can you just imagine? Now, well, wait a minute here. What's going to happen? You're the provider agency. You have 3 people who live in a home, and you can't meet this person's need because They now require nourishment by a feeding tube, and you have no way to do that. This person over here has Down syndrome, and he has early onset dementia, and you can't meet their need. So they don't have to move. And by the way, especially for the person who has dementia, I really don't want them to move. I want some continuity and consistency in their life, if at all possible. So what is that provider going to do? And the conservators or guardians for each of these people will say, that's great. You know, my son or my daughter loves this home. I'm going to now have independent contractors come in. I'm going to use their Medicaid waiver dollars to have independent contractors come in, or another provider agency. I'll just make an example. They live at a home owned and operated by Easter Seals. Easter Seal says, we can't support this person. So the family says, you know what? We're going to call United Cerebral Palsy and have them come in and support the person in this home. Doesn't that look a lot different than the way we currently operate? If I said to most providers, another agency is going to come in and provide supports to this person in this home, what would their response be? Well, they can't come into this agency. This is our agency. This is gone. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual wording. I'm just giving you a heads up. Each individual must have the same responsibilities and protections from eviction that tenants have under state or local landlord tenant laws. Well, that's pretty straightforward. You know, the services that I need have nothing to do with where I live. Now, however, there may be covenances in my neighborhood that if my wife started to scream and holler and do things, somebody may say, we're violating the covenances in the neighborhood, and we could be forced to move or something else, or she couldn't live there. I mean, perhaps, because there could be covenances that apply to everybody. If such laws do not apply, a lease or other legally binding agreement is in place to provide those protections. So everybody must have a lease to separate who provides the support versus where you live. What must be included in a residency agreement? Length of the agreement. In other words, is this lease for 6 months, a year, whatever? The amount of and when payment is due, because people have to pay to live in that home, which is true for all folks right now, whether the families know it or not. The individual, usually with SSI or other some source of money, is paying rent in that home, which is unrelated to the cost of the support that they receive. Room and board is separate. Use and return of security deposit. Expectations for maintenance. Notice before entry into a unit. Not sure totally what that means. This is not my language. I hate the word unit. And I don't know if I think it implies that the person who lives in that needs to be made aware that somebody else is going to be coming into their home. Like currently, what's really interesting in many group homes now, something breaks and they have a maintenance department. Maintenance will just come into the house. They won't even knock on the door. They just come in, and the residents of the home, maybe a day support, so they don't even know somebody came into their home to do something in their bedroom or their living room or whatever. And this implies, in my opinion, though it's not clear, that I have the right to be notified before somebody comes into my home, which is almost unheard of currently. Right? Conditions that could initiate an eviction and the process to terminate an agreement. And that got an agreement or an eviction. It got screwed up on this thing, so excuse me. Okay, here we go. Legally, leases can be very restrictive and specific. And this is interesting too. It doesn't, the final rule does not prohibit what goes into a lease. I think I have lived in places, apartments, where my drapes had to have a white lining. We couldn't put up orange drapes like in our apartment. They all had to be the same color on the outside. I guess a provider could require that kind of thing. It's not prohibited in a lease. Subletting could be prohibited. Approval is required to paint the residence. I've lived in apartments where I just couldn't paint the inside orange and then leave. No more than 4. Well, and again, I would think that some providers would be doing this because there will be some people who might want to paint their one wall chartreuse and the other 3 walls purple. And so they might want some control over what happens with the folks living in the home, which they would have every right as a landlord to do, as they would for anyone. no more than 4 occupants in the residence, or whatever the number may be. Smoking in the residence is prohibited. That's not unusual in a lease arrangement. Can provider agencies write leases that negate the final rule? Now that's what's interesting. That's my question. So they can write a lease, right? And they can put lots of stuff in it, like you can't smoke in the house. Could they write a lease that say you can't have alcohol in the house? No. Could they write a lease that says you can't have someone in the house stay overnight of the opposite sex? No. Could they write a lease that says you can't have anybody in your bedroom spend the night? Well, and that's really interesting. I mean, because you do realize all of this, that's going to go into leases, and it's going to get challenged, right? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I have a hope that they wouldn't put those kind of restriction in leases. My guess is there will be providers across the country who will do that. They'll try to negate the final rule. That's my guess. No one is asking us to put a man on the moon, for Pete's sake. They're asking us to figure out how people can live normal, appropriate, integrated, valued lives. That's all they're asking. We'll figure this out. And we tend to always figure everything out. We'll figure this out. So no overnight guests allowed. Can they say that? No independent contractors allowed in the residence. I mean, and again, it's a question, right? Can they do this? So that the provider says, I don't want people from other organizations and agencies in here providing services and supports. Can they prohibit them in the lease? It is a question that has, in my opinion, has not been challenged yet. No alcohol allowed in the residence? Oh. The Mormon community. If I am a provider and the Mormon Church has residential supports and services, can that Mormon church who operates these homes, like an ARC, can they say no alcohol in the home? It's the Mormon Church. Or are they going to allow alcohol to come in the home? Hey, these are legitimate questions. Okay. You are a residential provider and you are faith-based under the Baptist Church. And the Baptists have a lot of group homes in this country. Are you going to allow some guy to have his girlfriend stay the weekend in the house, in the bedroom? Are you going to allow that? By the way, these are real questions. Right now, they're saying, no, you can't do that. You can't bring that person in here. You're not married. So these things are more, you lose the cost of care is the loss of liberty. The cost of care is the loss of liberty. I'm sorry. I don't have easy answers for us, but I hope when we leave, we understand how complex this is. Personal possessions must be maintained in the bedroom. And you will see, as we get to the other aspects of the final rule, that the home is the person. So if you want your religious artifacts in the living room, which is really interesting, which is just the opposite of licensing. It used to be you have 4 people in the home and somebody was a Buddhist and they put their Buddha statue in the living room. Licensing would come in and say, well, you can't do that. This is common space. That Buddha goes into your bedroom. These people aren't Buddhist. Somebody would put a crucifix in the living room, and they'd say, well, you can't do that. These other people, they're not interested in your crucifix. Put it in the bedroom. Guess what? Under the final rule, and you'll see it, just the opposite. I'm Jewish. My wife is not. She has a Christmas tree in our living room. Her Christmas tree, our living room. But you see how different this is, and it sounds easy. By the way, what kind of political signs now can go in the front yard? Somebody better have an answer. Direct support. Well, because it's a reality. People put political signs in their front yard. What do you do if the people who are providing the service and support and own the property, let's say it's an ARC residence, and one of the people in the home want to put a political sign out there that is highly controversial? Do they have a right to put that sign in their front yard? Do you have a right to put a political sign in your front yard? I do. We're going to have providers go unglued on this stuff. Direct support professionals shall be hired, evaluated, and terminated only by the agency. Can they put that in the lease? I would hope not. Meal time shall be determined by the agency. Where do the restrictions stop? And my guess, you will see all this stuff popping up in these leases and people starting to challenge it. We're going to get in really some interesting stuff. Okay, new HCB rules. Here's more of it. Each individual must have privacy in their sleeping or living unit, not my term, that's the term unit, with a lock and key controlled by the individual and appropriate staff. So now all individuals can lock their bedroom. There's no problem with the staff having access to it. And which in many cases, licensing in many states said, well, they can't lock their bedroom, right? But now I should be able to lock my bedroom. I don't want any of my housemates coming in there during the day. I don't even want the staff to come into my bedroom during the day. I don't want my staff ever to come into my bedroom. Okay, individuals must be allowed to furnish and decorate their own sleeping and living areas. Okay. Well, what's that mean? I hope everyone's with me. Individuals must be allowed to furnish and decorate their own sleeping and living areas. Okay, good. You ought to see the posters I put up in the living room of all the naked women. Can I do that in my home? Can I put posters of naked? Yeah. If my wife says I don't want them there, I'll probably take them down. But it's my home. How do you deal with this when you have staff that are insulted and find it horrible when somebody does that? How do you deal with it if one of the other housemates? Well, how do you deal with these things in real life? It's life. You know, it's no different than when my daughters were in college, in graduate school, they had an apartment. And they would put cards, back then before really a lot of software, at the student union building looking for apartment mates because they couldn't afford their own apartment. They would interview to see if they wanted to live with that woman who came in. And then one of the women would say I want my boyfriend, he's having problems in his apartment, he's moving out. I want him to stay in my room for a few weeks till he finds another apartment. The other two apartment mates say, we don't want your boyfriend in here. We're sorry. Does she have the right to have him? She has the right to say, I'd like him here. She does. They have a right to reject it. So now you have two differences of opinion. People work these things out. That is real life. It happens every minute of every day. And people come back and say, well, how are we going to make this stuff work? I had to accommodate my wife with her Christmas tree. I never had a Christmas tree in my house. It's not who I am. But you accommodate, you make adjustments in life. That's not what licensing is about. That's what this is about. So you can see decorating the house can be a real issue, right? Depending on how we decorate it. Have access to food at any time. Now, there is a caveat we're going to see in the waiver. Unless specified and contraindicated in the ISP or IPP. We obviously have people who have conditions like Prader-Willi, that if they had access to food at any time, they'd be dead in 24 hours, okay? Or people who have brittle diabetes, who don't have an internal locus of control or lack the understanding, and they could go into a diabetic shock and die. So we have to have some kind of controls, and that is specified in here. Other than if it's not in the... So the guy now who gets up at 2 in the morning, he's 30 years old, he has Down syndrome, gets up at 2. Bill, what are you doing up? Cherry Garcia, you want to eat a pint of Cherry Garcia? You can't have ice cream now. Go back to bed. Tomorrow we'll talk about it. Guess what? Can't do that. Can't do that. If he has to have his food, by the way, can you and I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and have a pint of Cherry Garcia? Sure. Yeah, and I do occasionally too. But bottom line is, he can be restricted, but it has to be in the document, supported with good factual reason. It can't be because the staff doesn't think he should have a pint of Cherry Garcia. They're not in control anymore. Don't you realize how difficult this is going to be for staff? Many of whom don't have control over their own personal lives. Their finances are out of control, their kids are out of control, their marriage is out of control. This is the one place that they feel good because they can control these people, and now we're taking all that control away from them. Whew, this is going to be heavy. This is all emotional stuff, friends. And to have visitors of their choosing at any time. I can have visitors of my choosing at any time. How do you work this out? units. Okay, individuals sharing a living unit must have a choice of roommate. What they actually mean is housemate. And this is not vulgarity, they've bastardized the term, okay? They really don't. People have interchanged the term roommate and housemate so long they don't know what it means anymore, okay? But they really mean housemate. You have a control. People just can't come into your home and live there, and you can't say anything about it. They don't really mean roommate, they mean housemate. These requirements, and here it is, may only be modified if the individual has a need that justifies deviation that is documented in the individual's person-centered plan. There it is. Not in there, can't do it. HCBS cannot be provided in settings that include hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, institutions for mental diseases, and ICFs. And you may think well, of course not. Well, there's an irony. Waivered services are actually being provided on they're stopping now, some state institutional campuses. What happens is the institution will have many of these institutions are very rural areas across the country. That's because they were originally farms. And they'll start a day program on the campus, and people within the surrounding area who have a developmental disability will come to the campus. They may live with their families and so forth because there's no day support. And their service on that campus is being paid by waivered dollars. Now, for everyone else who lives on the campus, it's ICFDD dollars, but for them, it's waiver. You can't do that. Or you'll see some nursing homes that'll have people with developmental disabilities in the nursing homes, and Medicaid is paying for their residency, but then they'll take a room or they'll have a vacant hall and they'll put a day program in place, and they have been paying for that day's support with Medicaid waiver dollars. CMS has come in and said, you got to stop all that. So that's their top priority, is stopping that, because that's really horrible. That's just the opposite of what we want. And this is more just boilerplate. But I want to get to this point right here. This last one, that is the kicker. That's it. That's why all facility day sites will close. That statement right there. Any other setting that has the effect of isolating individuals receiving Medicaid HCBS from the broader community of individuals not receiving Medicaid HCBS. That's pretty clear. And it obviously has that effect. And this is more boilerplate. I just want to move on. This is interesting. So some providers have tried to meet the final rule by using reverse integration. Isn't that clever? So they'll take a facility-based day program, and rather allowing people in that program to spend their day in the community, they'll take individuals from the community who don't have a developmental disability and bring them into the day program. Guess what CMS has to say about that? CMS expressed concern that Kentucky, quote, has added language suggesting that bringing individuals from the community into service settings, particularly non-residential settings like day support environments, would enable them to meet the integration requirements of the HCBS rule. Under the rule, quote, with respect to non-residential settings providing day activities, the setting should ensure that individuals have the opportunity to interact with the broader community of non-HCBS recipients, so that what they'll do is bring in elderly folks who would be going to daycare, non-waiver kind of folks, and bring them into the day program and see, we're integrated, we're bringing in these other folks, right? With the broader community of non-HCBS recipients, and provide opportunities to participate in activities that are not solely designed for people with disabilities or HCBS beneficiaries that are aging, but rather for the broader community. Can't do that. And this is a series of graphs that basically take everything that I have shared with you and synthesizes it. And what you see across the top, the property owner, and you have the support recipient or leasee, has a lease. And then you notice the staff report to the support recipient. And the staff may be from an agency support provider, right, from an agency provider, or they could be an independent contractor. And it says the property owner may be the resident. Who owns the property is irrelevant, right? Many times you and I live in places you don't even know who owns the property. I mean, I lived in an apartment complex. I don't know who owned that apartment complex. I had a lease. I didn't know who these people were. The property owner may be the resident's family, agency, support provider, unknown and unrelated entities, housing foundation or HUD. The support recipient lessee must be afforded the same rights and responsibilities as any lessee would be accorded by virtue of law. Additionally, all covenants and ordinances as standing are applicable. That's a living room. That's a photo that I've taken. I got thousands of these photos. And there's two more of agencies. These all happen to be in California. There's another really interesting thing. You go to many of these group homes, and you walk into the dining room, and they'll have posters this big from the U.S. Department of Labor. Can you imagine? I have home health care agency, and they come into my home, and they say, we got to put all these posters up on your wall from U.S. Department of Labor. What would I say? I don't want those posters up on my wall. And they're going to say, well, our staff have to be able to see those posters. That's fine. Go figure it out. I don't want them on my wall. It's not my problem. It's my house. It's your problem as a provider to figure out how you're going to do it. 3 individuals reside in each of these homes. Dedicated office space takes up a significant part of the home's common areas. To meet the office needs of a home manager without intruding upon the residents. Homes are doing many things. Many of the homes, group homes, have garages, and they're using the garages now as office space. Some have basements, they'll use the basement. Some are getting these portable things, desks that totally lock up. They're no bigger than this, and they can put their laptop in it and other things and files and so forth. The lessee's cohabitation should be a function of preference or fiscal necessity. Everybody under the waiver has a right to a home of their own. You got the money to pay for it? Good. You don't? You can't have a home of your own. I mean, a lot of people in California who don't have a disability would like a home of their own. But they have to cohabitate with somebody because they can't afford a home of their own. Cohabitation should hold in the expectation of sharing space, not lives. You follow that one? What has happened in most group homes were originally designed and developed for fiscal purposes. It is more cost efficient for several people to live in the same space than to have your own home. But what has happened over time, we've imposed them to have to share lives and not just space. So there's even an expectation that we have family-style dining. Everybody has to eat together. That was never the intent. When my daughters had their apartments in graduate school, they would go here to eat, they'd go here to eat. Maybe once a week they'd all buy a pizza and share a pizza together. But they didn't share lives. They didn't all go out together dating people. They didn't all go to the movies together. Maybe once in a while they would. They didn't share lives. But in many of these group homes, we expect people to share lives. That's not the intent. It's your space. The lessee shall have full authority to hire and fire the staff who provide support. Though a lease may utilize several support staff, said staff may be from the same agency, different agencies, or independent contractors. Okay, so here we go. Unless otherwise specified by HCBW regulation, the support staff may be a personal friend, family member, or acquaintance acting as an independent contractor. So now what happens if I want to hire a felon? Can I? Sure. Can I? I can. Can I hire a felon? Of course I can. Matter of fact, I can go to the parole department and say, I only want to hire people who have been released and are convicted murderers. I don't know. I mean, that's what I wanted to do, that's what I can do. The support provider's relationship with the support recipient is at will, meaning the support recipient may sever any and all relationships specified in the contract. You'll be able to choose where you live, with who you live, have your personal space and time alone. You do realize that under our current system, many people who live in congregate residences are prohibited from being in that home without having staff in the home. Are you aware of that? licensing depending upon the level of license. That is this silly level system California has, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, Jeffrey? And you can't be in the home. Even if you are capable, we have people, I'm in these homes all the time, who will leave the home by themselves, get on public transportation on a bus, go to a volunteer site or work, no oversight, because they do fine, but they can't be in the house by themselves under our current system. It doesn't make any sense, but it's the level of the home that says you have to have staff present in the home. So, by the way, there's no staff, and this is like gets really interesting. There's no staff in the home during the day because no one's there, right? The guy comes back because he's not feeling well from his job. It is required that everybody have a key to the front door of their home, or you have some kind of code. He's prohibited from going into his home during the day. I'm not making this up. I'm on camera. Why? There's no staff. The staff are not there during the day. He got sick. He had to leave his job or his volunteer activity and came home. The door's locked. Many of these providers now are setting it up. They're putting these timer things so they can't use the keypad during the day so the individual can't get in the home because the vendor or provider will be in violation of licensing. I don't blame the provider. This is just a difficult situation. That's why licensing has to go. We're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. Come and go as you please. Set your own schedule. Choose how to spend your money. Choose who cuts your hair. Choose which grocery store you go to. Choose which pharmacy you use. Choose which doctor you see. Choose where you work. I mean, how many homes now that all the groceries come from the same grocery store for everybody? Or worse yet, the staff buy the groceries. The people in the home are not even allowed to go grocery shopping. Choose which church or religious service, if any, you attend. Okay, strategies for implementation. That got corrupted. Sorry about that. In the majority of states, the system of service delivery mechanisms, and this thing really did get messed up, I'm sorry. Anyways, what it basically says is, in many states, the current system of how we operate, the system of reimbursement and how the system is structured are in direct conflict with the final rule. That's what it says. It got corrupted, sorry about that. It appears that our efforts to achieve compliance is like putting a square peg in a round hole. The peg is the HCBW final rule, and the hole is the gestalt of the IDD service system. The system has to change. Either the peg or the hole must change. The peg's not going to change. Given that the current system of service delivery is in opposition to the final rule, it is strongly recommended that a comprehensive, here's my suggestion. This is the only way I know to make this work. We have to go to a voucher-based system. By the way, you do understand that that is what is recommended for the veterans healthcare system, right? I mean, you ever follow what's happening in so many veterans hospitals, how horrible the care is and how many months people have to wait for service, just absolutely horrible. How much money do we spend on veterans healthcare? Billions. Is there someone here who honestly thinks you can fix it by spending more money? No. You can't fix it. I don't care. You can double the whole veterans system. You ain't going to fix it. You can't. The only way you can fix it is to give every veteran a health care voucher with no cap and go anywhere in the world to get your health care. You empower them. Who's against that?
The VA.
Of course. Yeah. Jobs, you see. Who was in opposition to closing the developmental centers in this state? The state-operated developmental centers. Not complicated. Who's against this stuff? It's the people who are going to be impacted. Generally, vouchers work as both financing mechanism to ensure equity and programmatic tools to reduce barriers to access and increase use of critical service. Unless otherwise restricted, HCBW vouchers empower the waiver recipient to determine from whom and where the supports are received. I don't know, and maybe somebody else knows, how we're going to make this work without vouchers. I just can't, I can't fathom it. And I truly believe that a voucher system will be more cost-effective, cost-efficient, ultimately improve service. By the way, I'm a segregationist. I have no problem with segregation. If a group of nuns want to live on a convent, let them at it. They can, by the way, they can even prevent me from coming in, you know? So the only people there can be the nuns. The issue is not segregation. The issue is who is being segregated and why. I mean, a lot of people segregate themselves. The Amish segregate themselves. I have no problem with it. They have lots of good reasons why they want to live where they want to live. So there's different forms of segregation for different reasons.